Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Logos Roundtable, episode number 10. I'm joined tonight with Caleb and Steven. We're going to be having a great discussion tonight on dinosaurs and the great big dinosaur hoax. Are dinosaurs real? Is it all just another scandal? Are we going to mention one of the Huxley names tonight? Oh, darn it, I already did. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen who play the drinking game, you got to start early. So tonight we've got a lot of interesting research, a lot of meat to get into. We're going to be discussing the ridiculous, if you can call it, debunking that was done by Trevor Valle on the Joe Rogan Experience. The show is about as fallacious as one can get. We're also going to be getting into the history and a lot of meat and background on the topic of dinosaurs, where they came from, who brought them about. Does this subject tie into any of the shows that we've done in the past? Royal Society or Gordon Wasson or the Huxleys or any of that stuff? Probably not. I mean, that would be a real stretch if we ended up being back into the those same people and whatnot. I ask people in the audience to please keep it on topic and cut with the remarks and stuff so that we can focus and maybe get good questions and whatnot out of the chat and from the audience. We also appreciate any support. Please go to the Logos Media website and support there for me, or you can hit the Patreon account button up there at the top. You can also, let me just get rid of that blue bar there. You can also, Caleb, why don't you give out your information?
Yeah, sure. It's mick.caleb@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat too.
And Steven, you want to go there?
Yeah, mine is just my name without the space at protonmail.com. I'll comment it in the chat as well.
And so, wow, we've already got 70.
Oh, yeah. You're going to have to make me an admin because I still can't.
I don't know why it's not allowing you to do that. I did add you. It may,
Caleb, you want to comment my email there?
We'll have to figure it out again and see what's going on there. But again, anybody who keeps going off topic there, I'm going to have to put you on timeout. So enough of the remarks. And especially Cyrus right there, you're going to get the first timeout since you did that after I already asked you to knock it off. And so let's see, we've already got 81 people watching us tonight in the first couple of minutes. That's good. It should be a good popular show tonight. But so let's dig into it. Caleb, do you want to start?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, all right, the topic of dinosaurs. This is going to be kind of touchy subject for some people.
You know what I should say, Caleb, just before you start is, you and I did the show, 2 shows, exposing that vampires were real.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing a lot of research, also discovering exactly how werewolves are real, and we haven't done that show yet, but it is October, so we'll probably get to that soon. So vampires and werewolves are real, folks. Vampires and werewolves are real. You've been told that they were fake, and now we're going to go into a topic called dinosaurs that you've been told are real, but are they real or not? So we're going to go into that and expose a lot more. And, this is going to be a heck of a lot deeper than that nonsense debunking that my former friend Joe Rogan did. And I haven't been friends with Rogan since I was on his show in 2008. By the way, I was friends with him for 2011. Sorry, I was friends with him for 8 years. But after that show, he interrupted for dick jokes every few seconds. Every time I tried to say anything important, he interrupted to tell a dick joke. And one of the worst interviews I've ever done. But he went out and became the poster boy for psychedelics, promoting all of the very stuff that I was exposing. And he really took off when he started doing all that. Of course, he was doing the comedy show or the laugh shop or whatever, the comedy store, whatever in LA. But anyway, sorry about that, Caleb. I just wanted to mention that, that whole tie in there. So go ahead.
Sure. So I like to approach the dinosaur topic. the same way I approach all the rest of the research topics that I do, but specifically when we're trying to, get some of these things across to people. Some of the things I run into are people will immediately just say, how could they have created this huge giant hoax? There's no way, that there's so many people involved in it. And all I do is ask that you approach it like the same way you would if you were on a team, like a forensic team of crime scene investigation, where you walk in and you don't sit down and go, oh, I wonder how they committed this giant crime. You don't start thinking of the why before the who, what, where, when. You got to go gather all the evidence. Pretend like you have to prove this stuff in a court of law. So, what you got to do is learn the trivium first. That's a big thing. I try to say that every show. Focus a lot on the trivium. That'll stop us from getting into stupid circular arguments where we start talking about, speculation and it's logical fallacies, etc. So I would say that the case that I'm about to present, we're going to try to show, or we're going to show the evidence either way, for or against. And I would say that once you compile both arguments, always look at both sides. Don't do this thing where this guy on that Joe Rogan podcast, I watched some of that. It was agonizing to watch this guy. He's like just trying to completely censor one whole side of the argument. And usually when people do that, that's because they're scared, they're fearful, etc. of, the truth fears no investigation. So, but we're going to try to show strong evidence that shifts the scales on of doubt to reasonable doubt, show probable cause, etc. We're going to, not only do I say that you cannot prove that dinosaurs do exist, but we're going to show that we can actually follow the money and show intent to commit a conspiracy that involves many people that are all tied to all the work we've already done, and as well as show a profitable type of industry. That might get into a little bit of speculation later after we present the case, and then we'll talk about possible reasons of why at the end. Hopefully we do that. But so right off the bat, I would like to just show some history real quick on some of these characters involved in the first dinosaur discoveries. And just to give you a little teaser quick so I can get into some of the interesting grammar before, because I don't know if we'll have time to get through all the grammar. We're going to do our best. But I just like to read some quotes from an article from 2013 that I found that a lot of other people are making videos about. This is the original article. I'll read the source when I get to that. So the class Dinosauria was originally defined by Sir Richard Owen of the Royal Society. Okay, so big red flag there. You've already seen, if you've been paying attention to all of Jan's and also Holly's Royal Society shows. This is going to tie into all that stuff, even go into Salem as well. And superintendent of the British.
Try not to give too much away yet.
Sorry. And he's the superintendent of the British Museum of Natural History Department in 1842. Okay, so here's our timeline here. We're in the mid 1800s when all this stuff about dinosaurs first starts being talked about. All these phrases start being coined, and then the fossils to support the theory. The theory comes first for this timeline. They don't find, fossils and then go, oh, I wonder what these are. First, they have the theory, then they find all the fossils. Okay, interesting, right? In other words, the existence of dinosaurs was first speculatively hypothesized by a knighted museum head, coincidentally in the mid-19th century during the heyday of evolutionism, before a single dinosaur fossil had ever been found. So and then the mainstream press at this point, the Masonic mainstream media, got to work hyping stories of these supposed long lost animals.
Let me just interject right there because Eric Dubé made the same point about the Masonic media, et cetera. So just be careful because, that's, for those out in the audience who want to use appeal to ridicule rather than thinking, oh, he said the Masonic media. The media actually tells us the truth, which they don't. They are actually the fake news for those of you who haven't figured it out yet. We just need to realize this. So I just wanted to point that out. Caleb, go ahead.
Yeah, the media stuff is a whole nother, rabbit hole bucket to get into. But a few unidentified teeth that he mailed to the leading paleontologist Joseph Leidy, who we'll get into in just a second, who several years later declared them to be from an ancient extinct Trochodon dinosaur, which beyond ironically means rough tooth. Okay. So this guy, Sir Richard Owens, coins this term. Then 12 years later, they find let's see, what was it? It was, lo and behold, they find in 1854, Ferdinand Vanderveer Hayden, during his exploration of the upper Missouri River, found proof of Owen's theory.
So they always, and what you'll find throughout paleontology is they always create the idea and then go out into the field and find the evidence rather than, getting grammar, finding evidence first and then building a theory. They start with a theory and then they go out into the field to find the evidence to substantiate their own theories.
Correct. So let's see here real quick. So we just mentioned Joseph Leidy, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Leidy was a early American supporter of Darwin's theory of evolution and lobbied successfully for Darwin's election to membership at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. Okay, this is a reoccurring theme that you'll keep coming up with in your research when you look into all these characters. Pretty much, there's the Dino Wars between two sides, two of these people. This one whole side under what's his name, Cope, is riddled with all of this Academy of Natural Sciences references throughout all of the research that I find. And we'll start to dig into that in a minute. But all right, back to this guy, William
Parker Folk.
Yeah, so William Parker Folk is he was alive in 1816 to 1865. He discovered the first full dinosaur skeleton in North America called the Hadrosaurus, which means Folk's big lizard, in Hatfield, New Jersey in 1858.
See, and they always come up with a fancy Latin name to make the animals sound really cool. But if you knew it just meant Folk's big lizard, that doesn't sound really cool. And, even the word dinosaur is the same. Dinosaur just means terrible reptile.
Mm-hmm. So Joseph Leidy, William Parker Folk, and Edward Drinker Cope. Now we have these three guys linked to the Academy of Natural Sciences. And William Parker Folk, the guy who discovered the first full dinosaur skeleton in 1858, was born in Philadelphia, a descendant of a Quaker Welsh who had immigrated in 1698. William Parker Folk was an abolitionist, prison reformer, pamphleteer, philanthropist, lawyer, historian, and geologist, the last of which directly led to his discovery, which was partially named for him by Joseph Leidy, and for which he was best known. Okay, so interesting that he's a descendant of a Welsh Quaker. Okay, now also in Edward Drinker Cope, when you start researching him, he was born to a wealthy Quaker family. Alfred, an Orthodox member of the Religious Society of Friends. Okay, now it's interesting when you look into the Religious Society of Friends for Quakers, right on the Wikipedia page even, it says something interesting that
For which guy? Sorry.
Yeah, this is for Edward Drinker Cope.
Okay, I'm just going to pull him up here on the screen here.
Yep.
And thanks to those of you who supported Go Coochie. Thank you for the $10. Thanks to Anthony and Brian for $5 each. I really appreciate your support tonight. There's 175 others of you watching tonight. Please help and support the show so we can continue to do research like this. So Edward Drinker Cope, what a funny middle name. But that's this guy here, Edward Drinker Cope. Anyway, lots of ties on him as well. So he's a Quaker. Of course, Holly and I have gone into the Quakers and their origins from the Diggers and from the Puritans, who were, of course, crypto Jews. They were not Christians as far as all the research we've done, Cotton Mather and all of them. But that's, not the direction that we're trying to go into tonight. We're trying to keep it focused just on exposing this scandal.
Yes, correct. I will just mention that it is important to note that when you look into the Religious Society of Friends, who it's interesting to look into because these guys helped fund Cope throughout his career. So we're starting to see both sides of the Bone Wars being funded by these two different groups, and the other one is a little more obvious. But this, which we'll get into, but this one, the Cope, it's like, when you look into his whole entire career, I was open to him just being a pawn in the game, and who knows, what kind of relationships were actual, you could prove that they were nefarious people involved in some sort of conspiracy. Well, when you look into, one of the things you'll find is that this religious group that was helping fund him, like Jan said, the Quakers, turn out to be a Protestant group. And it's interesting that right in the literature, it says that I'll read it. Members of the various Quaker movements are generally united in the belief in the ability of each human being to experientially across the light within, or the light of God in everyone. And I would say that's very close to what they teach in Kabbalah. So I would say there's a very strong link that we could prove in a whole nother show, all the links and ties to Quaker, Kabbalistic, Protestant, that goes all the way back to the Reformation, the Statue of Liberty, the woman with the light of Lucifer that they talk about.
The light of the menorah
Esther.
rather than the light of truth.
Exactly. All of that is linked. So I wouldn't just throw that out right away.
Should we let Steve jump in here for a little bit?
One more thing on Cope, and then, yeah, totally. During this period, he had a job recataloguing the herpetological collection at the Academy of Natural Sciences, where he became a member at ladies' urging. Cope's job lasted 2 years, and he visited the Smithsonian Institute on occasion, where he became acquainted with Spencer Baird, who is another character we'll try to get into if we have time, who was an expert in the field of ornithology. In 1861, he published his first paper on the Salamanderidae classification. Over the next 5 years, he published primarily on reptiles and amphibians. Cope's membership in the Academy of Natural Sciences and the American Philosophical Society gave him outlets to publish and announce his work. Many of his early paleontological
Paleontological.
That's it. Works were published by the Philosophical Society. So you have the American Philosophical Society and the Smithsonian Institute. And we can go into that if we have time as well. Go ahead and jump in, Stephen.
So yeah, I would like to just address real quick the lack of information that we have.
In what regard?
So in regard to the fossils, which are the basis for the dinosaur theories, supposedly we have less than like a percentage of a percent of the whole fossil record. So to put this in perspective, we've got like 1% or 2% of the ocean explored, with less than 1% of it really understood or really researched. So you wouldn't go and take this very small fraction of a percent and expect that tiny percentage to represent the entire body of evidence that is out there. You wouldn't go and study a reef and expect that the rest of the ocean would all adhere to the things that the reef went under. The information that you collect from one small portion of something doesn't represent the whole body of it. So really the science based off of evidence is already shaky at best, because we don't have it. It's not there. It's hypothesized that there's trillions upon trillions of fossils, and we've got less than a percentage of those. So there might be some other arguments for it, but as far as fossils go, it's we don't have the info for it. So that point being made, lack of information is there. Also, the public appeal to it is really interesting too. At the time that it becomes popular, it really is more of a show than a science, with the bone wars and everything that Caleb had mentioned. It was a rivalry of sorts to produce the best dinosaurs or whatever. So even leading up to it, it started going for as evidence for evolution, saying that we're studying these animals from hundreds of million years ago, when we don't even know what animals we really had like 500 to 1,000 years ago, given mass extinctions of species and whatnot for whatever purposes. There's all
reasons.
Yeah, whatever reasons that a species would go extinct. Many are unknown because we don't have the technology to be able to explore those histories there. So based off of all that, the education system starts taking all this from the wealthy academics who are now promoting evolution. And when the exploration of the world into more scientific points were made, there was a already distorted lens, as Caleb was saying, that the ideas came before the research. So it's kind of like, I don't know, some people might see God in everything. So everywhere you look, there's God. Or a more paranoid version would be, you think your neighbor's tapping your phone, so you start seeing evidence of your neighbor tapping your phone everywhere. Like your neighbor waves to you or something, that's evidence that he's tapping it. Or you start seeing things that aren't there because of your preconceived notions. But with modern day technology, we can see that we are lacking in a lot of the evidence that is supposed to be presented for this theory.
Indeed, we are. And I want to get in, so Caleb mentioned a couple of these guys, but the Royal Society gets kicked off. They're in 1942. Sir Richard Owen of the Royal Society coins the word dinosauria. And dinosaurs first identified by Owen's theory based on a couple of teeth. Okay, so, and then from a dinosaur called a trachodon, or rough-toothed. That's all that means, a trachodon. And so despite such shenanigans, the feud between Marsh and Cope, so there was what was called the Bone War between, how do you pronounce his name? Sorry, let me just pull these guys up. Between Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Marsh, this guy. And so these guys, they have this feud going on. But so the quotes, the work says that the feud between them benefited paleontology immensely. When Marsh and Cope began to work, only 18 dinosaur species were known from North America. And then where Cope was a Lamarckian, a believer in the adherence of acquired traits, Marsh was one of the first American converts to Darwin's theory of evolution. Marsh was one of the first American converts to Darwin's theory of evolution. Okay, so in fact, here's Charles Darwin, and he heavily influences Marsh here, so we can follow it straight down. But it's going to get even better as we go through here, folks. So, as it turned out, ladies and gentlemen who play the drinking game, get your drinks ready. Darwin's, of course, for those of you who know, Darwin's propaganda manager. He was a guy by the name of, well, he's in red here, Sir Thomas Henry Huxley, or Thomas Henry Huxley. I'm not sure if he was a sir or not, like his grandson. But so Darwin is here. Now, Marsh traveled to England, where he met scientists Charles Darwin and Thomas Henry Huxley. So, so every single show, it seems these days, whenever we get in to expose anything, it leads to a Huxley family member. Of course, the Huxleys and the Darwins were married together. The two families were interlocked together. And so whenever we get into this stuff, we start to see, that the population eugenics stuff that's going on, that is the Huxley family. And then here's the Darwin family tied directly to them. And they have direct descendants that are, and you can go through the database and find, here's Angela Huxley Darwin right here. That's Darwin's, one of their grandkids. Dave Bruce Huxley and George Pember Darwin, Angela Huxley Darwin. So these families are intermarried, they interlock, and these are the families that do all of the eugenics. They do all of the dysgenics, which is the attack on us. They call it eugenics for them, but they're promoting all of this stuff. And, so it all ties to these same families. Again, of course, Aldous Huxley, whom I've exposed hundreds of times, he was one of the key architects behind the CIA's MK program. And, of course, he has been made into a hero by the psychedelic community. He was a Fabian socialist, also worked for British MI6, the Tavistock Institute. He's one of the most evil sons of bitches I have ever researched. He's responsible for the indirect death of millions of people. He was a major psychopath. You can see he's got his Illuminati one eye covered there up on the screen. Influences frauds like Terence McKenna, who created the stoned ape theory that people like Joe Rogan go around promoting. Of course, Joe Rogan supports the the whole dinosaur theory by appeals and mockery and name calling and whatnot on his show. But it's not just people will play the stupid Dennis McKenna interview. Well, Dennis McKenna debunked you by saying that you need to take your meds. No, Dennis McKenna was in on it too. Dennis McKenna obviously helped write these books. Obviously, he works at Stanford University, one of the major universities I've exposed, and he's been funded for years by, like the Rockefellers and groups like this that, we've gone into before. So people need to look a little more deeply and think a little more critically on this stuff. But, Avita Corporation, like I said, Stanford, University of British Columbia, but National Institute of Mental Health there, so nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But, Dennis's brother Terrence is who came up with the stoned ape theory that Rogan promotes. Now, part of this stoned ape theory ties to the Piltdown hoax, and that's important. So we have Rogan there promoting that stuff. But, so that ties over to the Piltdown hoax. Of course, the Piltdown hoax was created in part by a guy by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And the Piltdown hoax, basically what they did is they took bones from apes and people, and they put coffee on them and faked the skeleton and buried it in England, and they called it the missing link. Oh, what do the paleontologists do? They'll find something, they'll dig, apparently they claim to dig it up, and then they say, hey, look, it's the missing link. So it's a very similar theme to the Piltdown hoax. And so Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he worked with a guy, you may have heard of him. We haven't talked about him for a minute or two. He worked with a guy by the name of Julian Huxley, ding, ding, ding. And of course, he was heavily influenced by Charles Darwin. He was a Jesuit. Of course, the Jesuits, that is a crypto-Jewish front organization. For those of you who want to get into that, you can go through the database and look at that. But so they are corrupting all of the information. He influences Terence McKenna. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he creates the omega point theory, which became Terence McKenna's time wave zero. So, this is all of the fraud nonsense. And then, of course, that all turns into stoned ape theory, and we're going to take Jan Irvin's earlier work and promote it all over, these other shows and turn ourselves into a poster boy for the whole CIA MK Ultra movement called the psychedelic revolution. And of course, I've exposed all of my early work on that I don't agree with it anymore. Once I realized all the professors and people I was working with weren't on the up and up, I distanced myself, and I've done many dozens of shows, if not 100 or more, exposing all of that, including writing extensive articles with primary research on the Logos Media website that people can check out and verify the research there. But going back to Dobzhansky, or to Teilhard de Chardin, he's influencing and working with people like Dobzhansky, and here's Dobzhansky right here. Dobzhansky, he was another big eugenicist, worked with Professor Emeritus Michael Coe, who came up with the stupid 2012 end of the world thing. So we're right into the core of all of the fakers and the CIA agents who created this stuff. Of course, Michael Coe, even right on Wikipedia, it admits that he was CIA, so we don't have to go far. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring up this video here really quickly. And now I thank Stephen for catching this earlier tonight. So this is going back to this guy, Trevor Valle. He's wearing this T-shirt here of this god, Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, of course. Cthulhu. Now we go to H.P. Lovecraft right here. He heavily influenced E. Michael Coe, and he influenced the creation of the Satanist Necronomicon and stuff like that was later finished by Peter Levenda, who we could probably do a whole series on that guy and goodness. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into there. But anyway, H.P. Lovecraft, lots of connections we can get into at another time, but I don't want to get too far into that. But some pretty dark stuff there. So, but basically what Trevor Valle does is a massive fallacious assault against Eric Dubé, ending with threats to Dubé's life, etc. Now, if you have a valid argument, you don't usually go into name-calling screeds and threats and stuff like that. If you're full of crap and you're worried that your career is going to end if people, find out that you're wearing the Cthulhu shirt, and, using entirely fallacious arguments to the masses who buy your stuff, Anyway, so let's get on here. I'm going to get on to some of the arguments made in that show with Rogan. If either of you want to interject here, maybe you should now, because I'm going to have a lot to go through. I got a couple of pages just on this interview with Rogan and Valle. Do you guys want to jump in now, or hello? No?
Yeah, go ahead and play it.
Well, I'm not going to play it. I don't want, Joe Rogan has actually gotten my channel. Joe Rogan actually got my channel shut down some years ago for broadcasting my own interview with him. So I got to be careful. I don't want to broadcast more than maybe 10-second clips of that interview, because I do not want Rogan shutting my channel down again. So, but at the end, there's
not even any real reason to play that video. It's
pretty agonizing to watch this, this green bearded guy. I mean, I could, just use all the fallacious, ad hominem attacks and appeals to ridicule that he does, with his green beard and his wheat belly and his Jersey underground god, chthonic realm god shirt and everything. It's like his shirt. He's telling you. I mean, that
we should really stick to the topic though, because there's so much to cover in such a
all
long
right.
time.
So let's get to it. So Valle is more confused about if the show is about flat Earth than dealing with Dubé's claims on dinosaurs. So he keeps bringing up irrelevant topics and poisoning the well and saying, well, Dubé talks about flat Earth, so therefore anything that he said about dinosaurs is false. That's just poor thinking. Now, apparently, Valle claims to be an academic in this stuff. I don't know what his credentials are, but you don't make arguments by poisoning the well and going off to different topics to support all of your arguments. You got to stay on subject, dude. Jumps to marine dinosaur fossils were found about a century before, but he cites no examples. Let's see. And here, this is, I'm just going to pull this up really quickly. For those who want to learn more about the T-shirt that guy is wearing, Valle is wearing, look up this guy here. So let's see. He says that destroys that finding destroys any of Dubé's credibility. Of course, again, it's another poisoning the well fallacy. And he doesn't speak a sentence without swearing or appealing to ridicule. Again, you don't swear at somebody and appeal to ridicule every single word you have if you're right. Now, Dubé is citing evidence. So what Valle does is he really spins and attacks the evidence and Dubé for presenting it rather than looking at the other possibilities. Now, I'm willing to be proven wrong by Valle and these other people if they want to show evidence. But right now, from the evidence that's available out there, including on the, vertebrae, what site is that? The Journal of Vertebrae Paleontology, etc. I mean, we've shown already that the Royal Society and the Huxleys manufacture all of this evidence to support scientism and Darwin's theory and all of that stuff. That dinosaurs and paleontology would be involved in this is not a far stretch. We just have to, go back and look at, Holly and my shows on Salem, on the Royal Society, and on the history of these people. Look at, all of my shows exposing the Huxley family, and look at my shows with Caleb exposing scientism and all of this stuff. And then we begin to see a pattern. But Valle says that in the 1800s, when the teeth were discovered of the trachodon, that the teeth could be compared to a yet invented modern analog system. Well, how could you compare it and say, oh, well, that belongs to this over here, if the system of dinosaurs and all was just being invented? So he's putting the cart before the horse. That's a very common fallacy that he uses. He claims that the reason, quote, the reason we didn't know about things beforehand was because we weren't doing like wholesale intellectual studies of science when people were building effing pyramids, as if the pyramids didn't require science. Apparently, the people who had built the pyramids and had all that technology and science couldn't look in the sand in the desert all around them and go, golly, we can make a hieroglyph of that right here on the building walls. I mean, nobody would have ever thought of that, right? It's just, they got to make it up. Valle claims the reason we didn't know about, let's see. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Let's see. That's a straw man to what Dubé said, that no farmers at all, no other people discovered any bones ever before the term dinosaur was invented in 1842. So why wasn't this stuff discovered beforehand? So what he does is, oh, well, nobody was looking for it. Well, if you're walking along and you kick over some dinosaur bone, you would notice this big skeleton, and you would probably draw pictures, paintings of it. People further and further back in time would actually be closer to the events and any destruction of any evidence of stuff. So, uses, an appeal to ridicule, and past people were just idiots and stupid. We're so smart now. When the evidence shows that, people 15, 16, 1700s were actually far more educated and more intelligent than people today. So that's why we have different ages, though, throughout the anthropological record. And then my comment to that is that, or that's why they were, they manufactured the ages for, the Royal Society et al. To cover it up. Saying wholesale bullshit like that, and then he says the GD word, all of his evidence is swearing. And then he says, that's what, I think Joe Rogan said this, that's what a YouTube conspiracy video is. One person getting to spill their nonsense and they're unchecked. Okay, so now just to clarify, Rogan and I used to be good friends, and about once a week for many years we used to talk, and we used to go into deep, deep conversations about conspiracy research. Now Rogan goes out, and I think he even attacks the lunar landing and all of this stuff. I have to tell you, folks, it was Joe Rogan who sent me a 2-tape VHS cassette, a 2-tape series VHS cassette tape set of the faking of the lunar landing. And then, of course, when Rogan, in my opinion, when Rogan got the sci-fi contract, that's when you see him start attacking all of the things that he and I used to discuss, and other people on his forums. And so, see, Rogan doesn't go through each individual citation. He needs others to tell him what the grammar says, like a peer review system. That's an appeal to, or an ad veracunium fallacy, or an appeal to authority, like the Royal Society. And we've already exposed how the Royal Society, who's faking all of this stuff, created the peer review system, not to prove things, but to control outside thought from getting any hedging into Royal Society's control on so-called academic thought and what is supposedly true. So as Holly and I already showed, the Royal Society creates fake science, and we have all of these Royal Society people behind it. So he uses appeals to ridicule and ad hominem, ad veracunium, strawmans, etc., but never considers that Valle himself may actually be incompetent. So, you know, whenever you're doing research, folks, you have to think for a second, hey, Dunning-Kruger effect, while I'm researching this, am I incompetent? Have I really looked at the evidence? And what do I need to do to overcome any incompetence that I may have? Now, I'm not saying that I'm as educated as some of these, you know, paleontologists out there who know and who spent their lifetimes on this, but this stuff needs to be dealt with before I'm going to say, yeah, you guys have evidence that dinosaurs were real. Because when I look at all these people, all these Royal Society members, all of these Satanists involved in all of this stuff, it appears to me that all they're doing is attacking Christianity and creating things like, you know, Darwinism and all of this stuff to create a counter to Christianity so that they can have, you know, their argument, so that they can have, you know, their quote-unquote reasonable logical argument. But when you get into the circle jerk of them always citing each other and distorting the facts, it doesn't really hold up. So, you know, you have to look at things a little bit more deeply. But Valle claims that response videos can be blocked by the original person, so you can't. Basically, he's claiming that you can't upload it. When his and Rogan's hit piece has over 3.2 million views just on the one upload, and I think there's another upload of a longer version. And then Rogan and Valle control their own criticism. You know, so they accuse other people of what they do essentially, and Rogan has actually done that to me personally. Like, you know, go back to my July 2011 interview on his show where he attacked and criticized me. When I said anything about it on his forum, he would go in there and attack and ridicule me and use all these red herring tactics and all of this stuff. You know, so Rogan is very good at what he's accusing others of, as I have personally experienced with him. So I can speak firsthand. Just go watch that interview. It's one of the worst interviews I've ever done. And I got about 1,000 emails from his own audience, complaining to me about how he treated me on his show. That's no joke, folks. One of the worst interviews I've ever done. And then, anyway, let's see. And he says, we're going to distort the facts. They're going to distort the facts, come up with weak counter-arguments, and then use CIA-created terms like conspiracy theory to make their case. You know, they throw out the word conspiracy theories. You know, that was a term created by the Warren Commission and the CIA. I've shown that before, you know, the term conspiracy theory. I've shown the document for that. And so let me see if I can find it here. Let me see. Conspiracy theorist. Anyway, in here, one of these is the evidence that shows that it was a term created by the CIA and Rand Corporation, et cetera, under the Warren Commission to shut down any critical thinking. Here it is. And so we can see that's the actual CIA dispatch creating that term, conspiracy theory, to shut down critical thought and questioning against their official story. You know, so whenever you hear somebody use that term, conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist, it's name-calling, it's childish name-calling. What it means is I'm incompetent to deal with your evidence, so I'm going to call you a conspiracy theorist. You know, that's not thinking, folks. That's the absence of thought. Okay, so, you know, just be aware of when people use tactics like that. Valle brings up irrelevant conspiracies to paleo and irrelevant topics as an example, and he uses name calling, like jackass, etc. Then they go off onto, again, he doesn't stay on topic. He's got to use poisoning the well and all of this other stuff. He goes off. He doesn't believe in chemtrails, like you can't look up in the sky and see the things. He uses chemtrails, flat earth to debunk specific claims about dinosaurs. Why not focus on the evidence that supports the claims about dinosaurs rather than going off onto chemtrails and other topics and going, ha, 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 and acting like you made an argument? That's not an argument. That's called an appeal to ridicule. That's the absence of a logical argument. Let's see. So Rogan talks about massive confirmation bias from message boards. Like Shit Talking 101, Joe? Like your own forum, your own confirmation bias, but they talk about their own confirmation bias. They talk about Dubé, going out there with the idea that dinosaurs are fake. Well, let me ask, Valle, did you go out there with the confirmation bias that dinosaurs were real? You got to think about your own hypocrisy. You got to be willing to look at both sides of the evidence in an unbiased manner, with a calm mind, not, swearing and every other word, to support every single detail of what you're saying. If you should be able to support your argument with facts and evidence. But in your show with Rogan, I saw no evidence whatsoever presented by you. And in fact, Dubé was the only one who presented any evidence. So that is arguing the arbitrary, which means your argument is dismissed by default.
I will be right back.
So you got to, apply a little bit of logic when you, make your arguments and then claim that you debunked dinosaurs never existed. Valle claims that Native Americans weren't ever digging in the earth, so they never discovered dinosaurs. Well, how do you know that? You're claiming that all of Native Americans, all the people that lived here, whether they were Tartar or wherever they came from, not one of them ever looked down or dug into the ground. That's just, complete nonsense. I don't know how you thought of such a poor argument. He claims that there couldn't have been there could have been dinosaur discoveries, but they didn't know what it was, but provides no examples. Again, that's arguing the arbitrary. Argument is dismissed by default. Valle cites science on bones, but doesn't question scientism itself, the foundation of science, via the Royal Society and people like Thomas Huxley, who PR'd evolution for Darwin. He was Darwin's propaganda manager for this whole thing. So you got to question, the people involved in the background. You don't just say, well, I believe in Darwinism, confirmation bias, and therefore I believe in all of Julian Huxley and Thomas Henry Huxley and their friends' dinosaur theory because it supports my confirmation bias. So you have to use a little bit of critical thinking. Valle says that Eric Dubé is starting from an improper position without ever questioning his own position. I'll bet you that Dubé, Dubé he's taken some of my work and taken it out of context. I think he even took one of my papers and reorganized all of the paragraphs to make it look like his. I think it might have been him. It may not have been. But I know he cites some of my work on his website, but you don't accuse others of what you are then doing. You have to supply a chain of evidence for each step, which is what we're doing here. We've gone through, we're looking at the people's backgrounds, whom they're involved with, their ties to the Royal Society, their lack of scientific evidence to make the arguments that they do based on, how much of the nature of life they actually know about and have documented to be able to even argue for dinosaurs based on the fossil evidence. So, he's a quackademic and he's looked at the foundational field theories of his own field, confirmation bias, and therefore never questions the veracity of his own field, as it would require him to admit that he was duped, as I had to do with ethnobotany, with my own field from when I started the show. That, when you discover your field is crap, when you discover that Carl Ruck and Jonathan Ott and Gordon Wasson and Terrence McKenna and Dennis and all these guys are CIA and spinning a yarn to get people hooked on drugs, at least I had the nerve to come out and admit that I was duped by all my professor friends and admit that stuff was wrong and expose it. But, you gotta, if you're willing to tell the truth, just focus on the truth, not your confirmation biases and not your name calling and pretending that you're debunking anybody by threatening their life. So let's see. Valle starts from the position that dinosaurs existed while attacking Dubé for the same. And then Joe Rogan says, here's another problem. His voice is annoying as F. So that's a circumstantial ad hominem attack. I'm sorry, Joe, but somebody's voice is not a foundation to make an argument about. Terrence McKenna's argument or voice is annoying AF too, and yet you go around promoting his crap everywhere, even though he's total disinformation, as you full well know. Let's see, and then they go on, the stupid minority has a voice because they're allowed to put stuff out, and, other people like Joe and Valle apparently don't have total control on the media. Let's see, they called Dubé stupid, use ridicule, tell him, F you, do you think Dubé did good research? Of course, it's all confirmation bias on Valle's part. And they're like going through reading some of the comments that people make about Dubé's video, and he's like, how dare this person, he shouldn't be allowed to breed for agreeing with Dubé. And meanwhile, we're supposed to agree with the green bearded guy with the ridiculous, Satan monster on his shirt, right? Okay. So before the 1800s, no one knew that dinosaurs existed. Valle says under his breath, that's because they didn't. Oops. If you don't believe me, folks, go to about 9 minutes and 30 seconds or 9 minutes and 40 seconds into the video. When Valle goes to take a drink of his beer, he says, that's because they didn't. So maybe that was a slip of the tongue by him, but, before the okay, so, is he talking about, nobody believed in dinosaurs? That's because the nobody believed in dinosaurs that he's referring to, or that the dinosaurs didn't exist? It's pretty ambiguous. Valle says regarding no dinosaurs being discovered, that's because we find the first one, and then we're like, holy shit, there must be more out there. No, wait, first they wrote the theory, they created the term dinosaur, and then they went out and they found the dinosaurs for it. The cart before the horse. So, they're developing Darwinism and a theory from the Royal Society, and then advance it post hoc. It's a post hoc fallacy. So you got to use a little critical thinking. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Valle admits the bone wars, and never mind that most have already been proven frauds. He says he's got 9 more beers under the table there while he's on the show, and he says, I'm going to need them. That's a weird comment. Well, if you're confident in your research, why do you need to drink 9 beers? Really? And then he gets into Mary Anning, seashells by the seashore, one of the first to discover fossils. Now, she's got an interesting history as well. And so let me just pull her up. Let's see, Mary. Goodness. All right, so Mary Anning. So, she's written up about as one of the 10 most influential women who influenced science by the Royal Society. And she's hanging out with this guy, Sir Richard Owen, that we already mentioned, who is Royal Society. And he was actually enemies of Thomas Henry Huxley. But he's hanging out with Mary Anning. Mary Anning was also hanging out with this guy, William Buckland, who was another member of the Royal Society and was also awarded the Royal Society's Copley Medal. They created the gap theory or were influenced by the gap theory to fill in the missing pieces in Darwin's evolutionary theory. So this is the core group of people involved in solidifying their own arguments. So, it's like, hey, Darwin works with us, so we're, all trying to prove Darwin's theory, and so we're all going to, make this evidence or whatever. She finds, several dinosaurs, like she quote unquote discovers 5 dinosaurs on her own. And so some other people that she's involved with, this guy, Roderick Murchison, who's of the Royal Geographical Society, which isn't quite the Royal Society, but it's pretty close. Also, she hangs out with this guy, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas James Birch. Didn't have enough time to get much on him. She's written about by Charles Dickens. Of course, Dickens came up with the Christmas Carol story. But anyway, you can get into that and the whole faking of Christmas on another thing there. But so anyway, this woman has some really interesting connections, but she's tied into paleontology and there it is. All right, but she's connected to all of these people, and all of these people we can see, and we'll go into this here in a minute as soon as I shut up here. But we're going to start going into these people and their background connections to these different societies. Like Mars, she's at Yale. Holly and I have exposed Yale, but the Peabody Museum of Natural History. Peabody. Hello, George Peabody. Anyone? Well, that's the funding George Peabody. That's who. He's one of the co-founders. He goes on with J.P. Morgan to found Morgan Grenfell and Company, and that becomes J.P. Morgan Bank. J.P. Morgan Bank is where this guy Gordon Wasson worked, who was the head of MKUltra Subproject 58. Who is behind the MKUltra mind control. So that's where the funding for Othniel Marsh comes from. The same people that funded MKUltra, folks. And he's, of course, tied to Thomas Henry Huxley again. I'm sorry, you folks in the audience, you're probably getting wasted right now with all these mentions of Huxley, those of you who still drink. So Valle and Rogan resort to name-calling at Dubé, calling him Captain F-Face. I mean, that's really sad. I mean, I really hope that Dubé sued the crap out of them for defamation of character and all of this stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the stuff that they did to him. And then regarding underhanded shenanigans, Valle says that's because they were true paleontologists going at it against each other. Either that or they were playing two sides of the dialectic, like Holly and I exposed with the Royal Society and vaccines and all of this stuff, and which is just thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It's, you got to use a little critical thinking there. They get into sabotage. Let's see. And the field just wanted to get it out and roll, even though it was created by Cope and Marsh, who controlled it all, both with questionable backgrounds and agendas. Marsh discovered over 500 different ancient species, 80 dinosaurs, while Cope discovered 56, 136 total. And so, they just make all of these false non sequitur, it does not follow fallacies. So let's see, Valle does. Valle claims that they were the same species. How does he know? He shows no evidence for that. Again, that's arguing the arbitrary. It's dismissed by default. He has to have some sort of evidence to support these claims against Dubé. You don't just go out and name calling at somebody and then think that you have a sound argument. And the name Tyrannosaurus Rex is just like the tyrant lizard king. That's all that means. So, Tyrannosaurus Rex, get it? Rex means king. And so, let's see, it wasn't an outright fabrication. It was two dudes fighting it out, he says. That's a quote from Valle. Valle's first states bullshit regarding no 100% complete dinosaur has ever been found. And then he changes his tune and argues that dinosaur fossils only sue. Only one dinosaur found is the real one, as she was 98% complete. So then he backsteps and says, okay, there really wasn't one 100% complete. There was only one dinosaur that's ever been found that was 98% complete. And then Rogan says, oh, so he's playing on that 98%. Okay, well, as far as we know, and they've never let, us, the common folk, check it because, those fossils are so ancient and fragile. They can only make casts out of them by wrapping them up. So we can't verify the evidence that these things are real. So what is that again, folks? That is arguing the arbitrary. Argument is thrown out automatically. They have to support their own claims. They can't say, well, if you touch the fossils, they'll be destroyed. So only us experts, ad veracundium fallacy, can touch them. So we are the official experts. You all are too stupid, and we don't have to support our evidence. You have to go by the plaster of Paris, museum displays. And then Valle admits, we will use 3D printing or casting for all of that. Oops. Well, okay, so So you admit that you're manufacturing the parts of these dinosaurs. And then he says, many dinosaurs in museums are what we call conglomerates. So they're bones stuck together, conglomerations of many different pieces of different bones and dinosaurs or animals, probably just like the Piltdown hoax I'm going to suggest. And then he says, many of the fossils you see on display are casts. And then, so again, he's admitting that they're made up. And he says, those are replicas. Okay. Well, prove that it's a replica. I'm not seeing the original ones. I see the plaster ones. So Valle claims that the originals are rare, valuable bones used to create casts. Okay, so it's okay to create casts with them. That's not going to hurt them. To create museum displays, but, it's just, they're replicas. So, they're not frauds, they're replicas. Talk about, confirmation bias. He admits fossils are effing fragile. Okay, so wait a second. So it's okay, you admit that if you sneeze, they could blow away, but you can wrap them and make casts out of them. Huh, that's strange. I just thought, I see another contradiction there. I mean, your whole episode on the JRE show is nothing but contradictions and fallacies. You don't make...
Did you already cover when he talks about how they classify them?
I mentioned it briefly. Why don't you go ahead and hit that? I've only got a few more points to hit, and then I'll shut up here.
It was just kind of funny because he talks about how these fossils sit around for a few years before they get to the office where they're classified.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Good. Yeah, a great point. So he admits that they leave them locked up somewhere before they roll them out years later.
So, yeah, who knows what kind of effect that has, and good luck.
Or what they're doing to them in that time as well, right?
Yeah, who knows if they could potentially be doing something to them in there.
Or inventing the whole species.
Or unintentionally, yeah.
Or inventing the whole species and designing the whole story before they, put it out into the public.
But yeah, so it's not like they're out there classifying these dinosaurs out in the field where they find them and running tests while they're out there in their natural habitat. They sit in a shelter for a few years, and then they get shipped to where they sit until they're classified by the scientists based off of the documents. So
get this. So he goes on. Now, he claims they're 65 million years old. No way to substantiate that. Of course, carbon dating is highly questionable. Fomenko debunks it fairly well, but going back 65 million years is impossible. They're just guessing.
Well, it'd be between like this many million years and that many million years.
Right. Yeah.
That gap is just about as big as the age they're dating.
And if water ever got onto it, or if they were near certain trees or whatever, it can also totally alter the thing. So you got to get in and look at, how valid carbon dating is at all to begin with as well.
You'd have to create.
First, we have to be proved that the bones are real before we have to believe in the 65, million-year-old carbon dating record.
You'd have to create some sort of model that could accurately predict all the natural events and disasters that have taken place over these millions of years.
And if an animal pooped on the bones at some time, it's going to alter the date or whatever. It's, anyway. So Valle uses earthquakes in L.A. as an excuse as why we don't see real dinosaur displays, not only in L.A., but apparently any place. Valle argues that he found a whale in downtown L.A., so therefore dinosaurs have been found in other building sites. He uses a bait and switch. So wait, huh? Okay, so therefore you were called onto a construction site where they found a whale, so therefore dinosaurs exist. Talk about non sequitur, and that, non sequitur means it does not follow. It means, again, his logic is faulty like his stupid shirt. Let's see. He says he uses loads of name-calling, foul language to make his case. And logic, the first one to name-call loses. Is that a fallacy? I don't know. Again, I'm willing to be proven wrong if they actually have, solid evidence. If they're willing to take me to the Smithsonian or wherever and show me the bones and show me, look, this is the stuff. These pieces definitely do, fit together and blah, blah, blah. Not, these plaster casts and they're glued together and, they're 3D printed and this kind of crap. He references shark teeth in Bakersfield as an example of dinosaur findings. Again, that's a bait and switch. Then he cites a camel finding as, an ancient camel finding as evidence of dinosaurs. Again, that's bait and switch. And he also cites the evidence of a saber-toothed tiger. Oh, well, hey, we found evidence of a saber-toothed tiger, therefore dinosaurs exist. No, these are mammals. That doesn't support dinosaurs existed. I'm sorry, that's a bait and switch. Every single one of those that he mentions, he uses a bait and switch. He talks about the 99 freeway, which is up in Bakersfield, 2-3 hours from here. Runs through Central California on the east side. And he's, talks about the mammoth discoveries there. Again, bait and switch. So mammoth, you found a mammoth. Okay, we know elephants existed and still exist. So therefore dinosaurs existed? Sorry. It's a non sequitur and a bait and switch. And then, interestingly, during the whole episode, Joe is more interested in watching Trevor's responses to Dubé than actually watching what Dubé is saying. Joe is just, observing Valle the entire show. It's pretty hilarious. And then they bring up the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he presents a false argument about what Dubé is saying about the Bedouin boy who discovers the Dead Sea Scrolls. I now think the Dead Sea Scrolls are fake as well. After I used to heavily research the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I'm the publisher of John Allegro, one of the original Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, and I'm pretty well convinced at this point that they're likely fakes. But Dubé's argument was that you don't see farmers and kids and people discovering dinosaur fossils. It's always these experts who find them. And then he makes a comparison, Valle, to a Bedouin boy falling into the hole at Qumran and finding the Dead Sea Scrolls in the clay jars. So again, you misrepresent the argument. You create a straw man argument. You misrepresent it, and your argument again is false. So, and then anyway, it's just get that. He thinks that he's talking about newer things, and so therefore older things couldn't have been buried. No, he's talking about who finds them. Why is it that every single dinosaur finding that that Caleb and I and Stephen researched today, et cetera, they're all found by the same group of people who belong to the National Academy of Sciences or the Academy of Natural Sciences and the Royal Society? Why is that? We've exposed these groups and these people before as doing academic scams, and they're tied to the Piltdown hoax, but we can't say, oh, gee, they made the Piltdown hoax and they faked this stuff. We got companies in China manufacturing fake dinosaur skeletons, but none of this stuff might be faked.
Yeah, and I would say
Hold on, let me just finish here on this thought. We have, all these archaeological sites that I pointed out before with Julian Huxley and UNESCO, the World Heritage Fund, appointing all of these UNESCO sites as, and it looks, when you go in and you read Fomenko, it looks like Julian Huxley and UNESCO and these groups faked a lot of these archaeological sites, like Stonehenge. It's made out of Disneyland rocks. They made it in the 1950s. It was moved, it was shifted, it was aligned with the stars to make it look totally different than it originally did. But all of these sites, we see that with the Parthenon in Greece. We see it with the Sphinx. They alter these things, and you got a question on what masonry means. Are Masons like just carving things out of stone? The Freemasons as well. Are Masons able to make things out of stone and pour it like a marble or like it was an original rock to make us think that it was ancient? I would not be surprised at all if they had that technology. But the natural history museums are the lowest funded, he claims. I would like to see evidence of that. He goes off, and they have to get funding through foundation, nonprofits and things like that. Well, those are usually funded by the Rockefellers and all. I didn't have a chance to look into that, so I cannot prove that yet, but I would not be surprised for a second. He says, he goes off into a non sequitur that museum employment and operation or closures proves that dinosaurs must be real, because if dinosaurs were fake, museums would all stay open all the time, even no matter how badly they were run, etc. That's a completely fallacious argument, non sequitur. If it's BS and they're all employed in BS, his argument is that it's Dubé's fault for exposing the truth. Again, that does not follow. If they're in BS, maybe they should get a job that deals in truth. poisoning the well, guilt by association. He uses the moon landing. When Rogan sent me two VHS tapes arguing that the lunar landings were faked, and Rogan and I had many, many discussions about this stuff before he took that sci-fi contract and all of that stuff. So just saying, folks, it's just my opinion, but wow. Let's see. So nonprofits, corporations, and funded by grants from whom? And his arguments, his arguments is, if dinosaurs are fake, how do they become passé? So if they're not constantly in the media, if they're promoting Joe Rogan's stoned ape theory and psychedelics this week, and not the dinosaur fake thing, then therefore, because dinosaurs occasionally get passé, that must be proof that dinosaurs are real. Again, that's a false argument. It does not follow. It's a non sequitur. It's a nonsense argument. And he goes into this rant about how his life sucks, and, he's like, goes into his bartending, and, his being a bartender and how much he makes has no bearing on dinosaurs being real. That's a ridiculous argument. It would be like me saying, because you have a green goatee, Valle, that dinosaurs are real. It's stupid. So if you're being duped and peddling BS, it doesn't mean everyone in the field is aware of the scam. That's how scams work, is most people are not aware. Most people are believing and good-willed people. And that's how scams like this work. Your car payment, you can't make your car payment because your life sucks, dude, and you don't live in truth, and you go on the airline and making stuff up and attacking people and threatening their lives. And, again, he goes off into flat earth, ridicule, all this stuff, but he doesn't stay on the topic of dinosaurs to prove dinosaurs. Why do you need to go on to different subjects to prove dinosaurs? Why use appeal to ridicule and poisoning the well fallacies against Dubé rather than staying on topic? So, he literally threatens to end Dubé's life and wants to beat him up with a baseball bat. And then Rogan says Dubé is probably crazy, using an appeal to ridicule and ad hominem attack, and which is exactly what Rogan did to me when I was on his show, interrupting for dick jokes, telling the audience that they weren't smart enough to follow along with my research, etc. So I've experienced this personally with Rogan's crap. So anyway, I've held this stuff back for years, and, a lot of this crap needs to be said. But, the last thing that Valle mentions is that he will only mock Dubé until he wants to kill himself. So this is the so-called debunking of the research. So which one of you guys wants to take over from here?
Well, I don't know how much I want to even talk about that interview, man. That it was just agonizing to even get through. I will say just that a lot of times when you see somebody get that triggered and make so many logical fallacies and start to get angrier and angrier when he hears counter arguments, that's usually a sign that they're maybe deep down they know there's a lie there somewhere. And I would just be careful of anybody who gets that emotional about a counter argument. But anyways, there's so much in there that, there weren't any actual arguments. They were, like you said, mostly logical fallacies. So I think anybody can kind of plainly see that.
I'll jump in and just quick talk about the importance of getting swept up in the emotion. You don't want to get all swept up in the anger and emotion when you're trying to study something. There's studies that show that when you're pissed off and angry, you literally cannot think. The synapses don't work. You can't produce logical thoughts because you're in such a state of distress. So that guy, he's on a platform with tens of thousands of viewers. They're talking about millions of Twitter followers and whatnot. To be getting that many views, you should really be using the time to bring attention to the information that you want to share. So one of the main things that I wanted to talk about was just the growth and the acceptance of it. for as far as the main public went, it was just a working class people that were getting by. And the schools came about in the 1800s and provided an opportunity for these people to learn skills that would be safer and long-term beneficial for them, to get their kids out of the factories and to give them a chance at a better life. They get brought into these schools that are already under the influence of some of these people that we've been looking into, that kind of go with the dinosaur theory fits into it, but overall, even more so, just the deluding of the people, the science of convincing people and things that aren't true really developed in this time when dinosaurs became popular as well. And so it's just really interesting looking into some of that. The groundwork for a lot of these sciences that go to support evolution and dinosaurs were all laid out just in the last 150 years. And at that, a lot of the people, when you look into it, they didn't really take kindly to opposition. They slandered and were deceitful. Like, we look into the what's his name, Richard Owen character, and it seems like he had a knack for making public enemies. At least, if the accusations aren't true, then I guess the guy is not a liar and a deceitful con artist that fabricates information, steals other people's ideas, and doesn't give credit where it's due, and has a bias. So these are the people that set the scope for what these other things would look like, and all the other sciences that had existed at the time got obliterated by this state funding. And we didn't even have evolution taught in the school systems until the 1900s. I think it was like the 1920s or something. And by the 60s, it was starting to be accepted by fact by people. So about 100 years later, you got these wild arguments that are now being accepted as fact. And there's very little evidence, as we now can tell, that goes into these. So if anything, we need more technology and better tools and understanding of earth sciences and the processes that happened over history to be able to speak on these millions of year old theories, to be able to say that that's what they are. I really like to bring the attention back to the ocean. Like, we really don't know much about the planet, though. The ocean covers a lot of the surface, so we don't know much about that, much less do we know what's in all the rocks and what's down below the surface. I think the deepest hole that we've ever dug is like less than 10 miles deep or something out of the 1,000 miles of core that we have. So again, it's the promotion of critical thinking that I'm going for here, that the evidence isn't there. So, and then we have, people like on Joe Rogan's show who have there's academic branches. We could see just how ridiculous the school is when you have these guys as representatives for their sciences who say, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to be outside of your show with a bat waiting for you, guy. Because it just pisses people off so much that you might think
he's threatened that his livelihood is going to be taken away, rather than being worried of if his field of study is a fraud, which he should be worried about. He's more worried about that his livelihood is going to be threatened. So then he feels that he needs to threaten Eric DeBay's life, which is just pathetic. People, please keep it on topic in the chat there. Enough going off.
So yeah, and I apologize to anyone who's already really drunk, but the Huxleys do play a huge part in this, as far as the promotion of it through the school systems and whatnot. We got Julian Huxley, who's the president of the Humanist Society, or I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head.
Yeah, he was a big humanist. He was a member of the New York Humanist Society with one of the biggest frauds of all time, Albert Einstein.
He makes the claim that evolution is the central concept to the humanist movement. So really, if you want to be a humanist and for humanity, you have to believe that we are millions. We are a creation that's been millions of years in making. is, I mean, according to Huxley, but we don't really listen to much about what he says anyways. But yeah, it's all really interesting stuff. We've got 10-20 minutes left of the show, but it's just the generation of convictions is just fascinating to me, because I've been into epistemology for a little while and learning about how people understand truth and what truth is. And these people will take it to their graves that definitely, that there's definitely no God, or I guess I'm just using basically any belief as an example that is hard to substantiate. You take such a little piece of information and then run with it for the rest of your life to try and prove that it's true. Like, I don't even know. Some people do. I guess I'm just getting at, do your research and check out what everything has to say, and don't rely on slander and ridicule to support your argument.
Somebody's asking if we were serious about, or if I was joking about vampires and werewolves being real. Again, all you have to do is click in the channel. Caleb and I just did 2 shows showing all of the evidence that supports vampires, and we got enough to do a show on werewolves as well. But,
it seems that a lot of the alternate theories for evolution were covered up, and that there was a purposeful promotion of it to cover up and to ridicule the opposition. And it's just really interesting to look into that too. It's like scientific warfare to discredit your opponent. You just don't even let their opinions get out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's happened to me. I'm not even going to say his name, but he did the same crap to Adam Green recently,
Yep. So, yeah, you got to keep your mind sharp, study the trivium.
That's what it's there for, folks. We put it out there to, we're not here to teach you what to think, folks. We're here to show you how to think, how to verify citations. How do we go through and look at this information? It's simple. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who, what, where, and when is your data gathering or your grammar, your knowledge, the information that you're dealing with. Why is your understanding of that knowledge that you've already gathered, and it's and it's logic. And logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. So it's making sure that there's no fallacies or no lies or no contradictions in that information. And then how is the rhetoric and it's expressing the knowledge and understanding that you've gained through using the process. And it goes step by step. And if there is a mistake, if you go step by step, you should be able to show where the errors are. Just like, me going through Trevor Valle's, so-called debunking and showing that the entire thing was based on fallacies. Now, and it could be a fallacy on my part. If a so-called academic or expert could do an hour-long interview and only speak in fallacies and not support it, provide any evidence at all of his own arguments. But, the onus of proof is on them to support their stuff. So you don't just go, name calling and then pretending that you've debunked somebody's argument. That's not how logic and critical thinking work. And thank you, Polygonal Construction and Bahare, for your support and donations just now. Really appreciate that. And anyone else whom I may have missed when I was reading pages and pages of stuff there. But, if somebody's resorting to fallacies and they're not dealing with the actual information, what Valle should have done is said, hey, I'm an expert. Here's the citation. I can show you exactly where the evidence is and how that's not fake. But what did he do? He name-called, he screamed, he threatened the guy's life. That's not winning an argument. That's how you lose an argument badly. You don't, run people over and steamroll them and then tell them that they're wrong just because, ha, 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 I'm going to kill you.
It's definitely a public display of character.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I've been on the end of that crap from Rogan myself, so, Anything else, guys? Or are we already out of notes? Did we actually make it through?
No, I have about an hour's worth of notes to go.
Okay, well, we'll hand it to you for a little bit.
Yeah, we still got a lot, but you can go for it, Caleb.
I don't think I'll even be able to get close unless we do a part 2, but I'll try to hit a few topics.
We'll have to wait since it's October. We still need to cover werewolves, you know.
So I wonder if people grasp how important what Jan was just talking about with the Marsh, Othniel Marsh, however you pronounce his name, the guy who is on the other side of the dinosaur war, and the connection between him and George Peabody. I wonder if anybody realizes how important that is. Then you can see, even on Wikipedia, it says after receiving an inheritance of $100,000 from his uncle, George Peabody, Marsh and his many fossil hunters were able to uncover 500 new species of fossil. Okay, so he showed how there's a connection there to J.P. Morgan. So now all of a sudden,
I'm showing it on screen right now as you're going through it, just so you know.
So we got a connection now to JP Morgan, and I also have a Rockefeller connection. So now you see all these bankers, Kabbalists and Quakers and all these connections starting to, you're beginning to see the big picture here. I wanted to read this real quick here about how, they claim, on the Wikipedia site that he discovered a ton of new species, but what isn't really known very much to a lot of people is that so Marsh is said to have discovered 500 different species, ancient species, including 80 dinosaurs, while Cope discovered 56. Out of the 126 dinosaur species supposedly discovered by the two of them, however, only 32 of them presently are considered valid. The rest have all been proven fallacious and fabrications. None of them once claimed to find a complete skeleton either. So all of their work involved reconstructions. In fact, to this day, no complete skeleton has ever been found. And so all dinosaurs are reconstruction.
Except for Sue.
Yeah, except for the supposed Sue. Now,
that we've never been able to see to be able to prove that that's true.
I'm completely open. So when I make a statement like no complete dinosaur fossil has ever been found, I'm completely open to being wrong. However, I need to be able to have a team of independent researchers verify this. Like if you were in a court of law and we were presenting a case to you that dinosaurs existed, I would have to show evidence for that. And that evidence, you don't just say, oh, okay, I see it, I believe you. I believe that's evidence. You get to verify that. And so what we're saying here is, in the larger scheme of things, you have all these people involved in these circles. And it's just like the peer review system. It's a way to keep people out from being able to get into your little circle and expose the lie. If it really wasn't a lie, you'd let anybody research it, anybody look into it. The truth fears no investigation. So, just to kind of mention the whole paleontology scam. Paleontology is the study of life's formation and development. The I don't know why I have such a hard time with that word. Paleontological scientific approach is explained on Wikipedia as follows. When attempting to explain earlier phenomena, paleontologists and other scientists of history construct a set of hypotheses addressing the causes and then look for a smoking gun, a piece of evidence that indicates that one hypothesis is better explanation than others. Sometimes the smoking gun is discovered by happy coincidence during another investigation. And this happens a lot for dinosaurs. How convenient is it that this always takes place? This explanation is entirely consistent with the way paleontology works in practice, but it should be obvious to anyone capable of critical thinking that the paleontological establishment can control which hypothesis will be constructed. This is done through textbooks and the curriculum. In this way, students are brainwashed into a pseudo-reality controlled by the text material and the teacher's authority. A short practical example, a random dental bone is found at an excavation site, and from this dental bone, the rest of the skeleton is guessed at. We are not kidding about this. The entire dinosaur field of paleontological program is a sham. So okay, you find all these bones of a giraffe. Okay, a giraffe with a really long neck. Over here, you find some of those bones. Over here, you find some bones of a rhinoceros. Okay, you put them together, you change the face. You know, a lot of these dinosaurs are kind of modeled after some real, you know, like alligators are definitely real and definitely old. We don't know how old, and crocodiles as well. You know, so they take these creatures and then they, you know, use their imagination and construct these things for us to believe in, and we're not supposed to even question it.
Valle
Otherwise, we're
says a
crazy.
rhinocelot.
Yeah. So, and the other thing, people are always like, "Well, no, I've had to have seen real bones in museum." Well, I've actually went to a museum before and talked to a few different people and got conflicting information from them, which spurred me to go and do my own research and see if anybody could give me actual real bones. Now, the lady I talked to on one display told me that some of the bones were real, and she didn't know which ones were and which ones weren't. And another lady told me that there are no actual dinosaur bones on display because they all are too expensive and rare to be on display. And so I didn't know what to think of that. But you start to wonder, okay, so they've got these huge giant monsters on display. They're making a case, and meanwhile, they're making a lot of money from people going to come to see all these bones in the museums, you know, and so forth. So there's actually incentive there. There's motive there in money, and not only that, but you start to see these very interesting websites. Like there's these Chinese websites that actually make bones for the public. I think it's like 62% of the bones come to Europe and America, and go on display. They're almost all made in China, which is interesting. Most people believe that dinosaur skeletons displayed in museums consist of real dinosaur bones. This is not the case. Advisor for Steven Spielberg in the making of Jurassic Park, host of Discovery Channel's documentaries about dinosaurs, Don Lessem, defends his practice by claiming that dinosaur bones are too rare to put on display. He says, quote, "In museums, bones are cleaned and cast and the copies attached to one another to make skeletons. The real bone is too rare to put on display." Okay, that's interesting. The real bones are incarcerated in thick vaults to which only a few select highly placed researchers hold a key, which means that no independent researcher has ever handled a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone. No, when people unaffiliated with the paleontological establishment attempt to gain access in order to study these dinosaur bones, they are met with refusal upon refusal. Okay, so what a convenient thing that is, that they get to lock all of the evidence that would prove the existence of this theory.
They would be able to put all of our arguments to rest if they just showed the proof. Where's the originals that all the casts are supposedly made of? Show us. You know, you got to meet the onus of proof for your own argument. Don't show us, you know, plaster casts and fake nonsense and then pretend that you've provided us evidence. No, that's like providing second, third, fourth hand citations. You got to go to the primaries. I want to see the real thing. Don't sit there and say, well, if I sneeze on it, you know, it'll blow away, so therefore we can't show you the 65-year-old bone. Only we are the professionals who can appeal to ourselves. Only we get to wrap these things and create casts to then display the plaster of Paris versions to you, the stupid public. You know, it's just nonsense. I mean, these things sat in the ground for millions of years where nature itself did everything possible to these bones and they survived, you know. So, you know, let's see them. Let's see them. By your own words, let's see the evidence, folks. Meet the onus of proof. Make a sound argument. Because, you know, if that nonsense that Trevor Valle said, if that's the best you got, wow. You know, you got to go on some shill's show and lie I mean, wow, that's the best argument? No, sorry, I don't buy it. And that's just my own opinion, folks. Any lawyers out there, that's just my opinion, you know? Never mind the death threats and the name calling and the slander and all the stuff that you guys did.
I would also just like to mention, so the Rockefeller connection here too, as well as the banking funding of the actual organizations that all the people just happen to belong to, that find these first dinosaur bones, and then there's a rush, a hundred, like all the discoveries of dinosaur bones happened just in this huge. It's like the gold rush, and they made all this money off of it, of course. Well, also, Rockefeller coined the term fossil fuel. There's actually a YouTube little clip of a great interview. If you go YouTube, Rockefeller, what was it? I think I have it up here. How the Rockefellers created the term fossil fuel. If you want to watch that, that gives you a little bit of extra grammar. And just to summarize,
let me just interject there. Greg Quinones and Greg is often in the audience. He and I did a couple of shows exposing that oil is abiogenic and not from fossil fuels, not like the Sinclair oil logo with the dinosaur. That's all fake. It's, created by the volcanic action of the earth, and it's the second most abundant liquid. That's why every oil reserve in the world is full right now. That's why the United States current oil reserves are at 250%, which, 60% full is considered good. Greg just popped up in the chat. He is here and listening. Thanks, Greg. And, like down in Long Beach in Orange County, the Brea oil rigs, those are all full now. They were shut off for 50, 60 years. Now they're all pumping. All those oil wells are full again. How does that happen? Did more dinosaurs in the last 50 years jump into these pits and fill up all of the thing? Where did I missed it? Where were they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I was going to say that, but yeah, go ahead. The one other thing real quick. A lot of times I'll get that argument from people that, I've seen a documentary. I've seen all these documentaries and stuff. Just know that National Geographic is owned by Richard Murdoch, and he owns News Corp. News Corp also owns 20th Century Fox, the makers of the Ice Age franchise. You see these same stories, the same people, J.P. Morgan and the Rothschilds, who are invested in Vanguard, a Comcast company, Universal Studios, who made Jurassic Park and The Land Before Time, owned by Comcast. Discovery Channel is owned by the Discovery Communications, distributed by BBC, which is NM Rothschild and Sons Limited, are financed advisors to Discovery Communications. I mean, this goes on and on and on. I think people get the point about that. But one thing that is really important in this whole thing is there are so many hoaxes that are actually admitted, very similar to the Piltdown hoax. If you don't know what that is, real quick, Jan already mentioned it a few times, but he didn't. If you don't know what that is, they actually got busted making the missing link. They needed the missing link to try to prove evolution theory, and they ended up getting caught by putting bones together to make a missing link. And it was on display for years and years and years and years as real. So all these academics were stouting this as real.
Sorry, I got to correct you there. I'm calling them quackademics now because, it's just getting so obvious the more we look into the Royal Society and all these groups that they're all fraudulent.
Yeah, no, that's a good word, quackademics. So they get caught, and they actually admitted it. That's why it's important to see a lot of these hoaxes that were actually admitted. Then you begin to ask the question, so how do we know what's real and how do we know what's fake? Well, the onus of proof is on them to prove any of this stuff to be. I would venture to say that most of these bones, skeletons that they're finding, they're hiding from us for the very reason that they're actually, making them either, and I'm not going to speculate on exactly how they do it. I'd just like to present the case with the facts and let you guys make up your mind. But I will say also that if you go look at Google a bunch of these hoaxes. I have a ton of them. I wish I could go into all of them. There were plenty of bones that were on display, dinosaur bones that were on display. The Archaeoraptor scam, the Ish Ichthyosaur scam, the Hadrosaurus falky scam, the I mean, the list goes on, and these are admitted hoaxes. The hoaxes.
But wait. You know, the 30 or 50 or other ones that weren't hoaxes, that haven't been proven hoaxes, those are real then, right? Because we got the plaster cast to prove it, right? And we have Trevor Valle name calling and screaming and threatening to kill Dubé to prove that he's right.
Yeah, and you know, I got a ton of more stuff. I wish I could get through all this. I would at least like to mention the real briefly just that you know, the dinosaur gravity and the square problem. I don't know if anybody's looked into that. That's something that I haven't heard mentioned very much. I learned about that from a guy named Theodore Holden, who does work with I think it's the book Saturn Death Cult. He's got a bunch of stuff on Velikovsky and all this other stuff. But he, as I was reading through his stuff, he mentioned something that really made a lot of sense to me. So I'll just add that in here. He says, "Did you ever wonder why it was always the littlest kid in your class in school who could do the most push-ups and pull-ups on the chin bar? Or why you would never see a 200-pound athlete competing in gymnastics? Weight is basically proportional to volume, which is a cubed figure, width times breadth times height, while strength is a proportional to cross-section of bone and muscle, which is basically a squared figure. Double your physical dimensions, and you'll have a factor of 2, which gets figured 3 times for volume and weight. You'll be 8 times heavier. And and only gets figured twice for cross-section and strength. And you'll only be 4 times stronger. You'll have cut your power to weight ratio in half. Clearly, you can only have your power to weight ratio so many times and still stand up and walk. The mathematical limit for that sort of thing in our present world gravity or pressure is about 20,000 pounds, indicating that the largest elephant is something at like 15,000 pounds are the largest animals which in actual fact are possible in our present world. That means that the largest elephants that we have on the planet today, a lot of them are just a lot of them that are around 15,000 pounds. The biggest bull male African elephants can barely they have to sleep standing up. They can't even get off the ground if they get pushed over. They wouldn't be able to get up. They'd just die. Any bigger than that. That's just the bone density, the way that the pressure, the environment allows for. And you know, in the ocean, the dynamics are a little bit different. So you have these gigantic, you know, huge whales and such, and that's a little bit different. So. And I would say a lot of the quote unquote dinosaur finds probably have a lot of rib bones or hip bones and such from aquatic animals. And that would make a little bit of sense on that regard. But according to
not the hip bone anyway, but unless it was like a turtle or something.
Should probably start wrapping this up here.
Well, yeah. So anyways, I got a ton of more stuff, but
we'll have to revisit this in another show.
Yeah, maybe we can revisit it at some other time.
Yeah, I probably still didn't even have it. You know, and for the audience, you can get into the database and start going through, you know, paleontology and some of the connections I've laid out in there, you know. But one thing we didn't really get into a whole lot was the Academy of Natural Sciences. So all of these opposing views and all of the most of the discoveries were made by people of this one group: William Parker Folk, Richard Owen, Edward Drinker Cope, Joseph Leidy, etc. And then they're working with Charles Darwin and Thomas Henry Huxley. Not much needs to be said about them. You know, we know that the Huxleys are one of the most fraudulent families ever in history. Another sister group, a part of this stuff, is the National Academy of Sciences, where Huxley bridges the gap between the two organizations, and then Othniel Marsh is a part of that, and then the American Philosophical Society is also connected there, and then we see Gordon Wasson was working with them on MKUltra Subproject 58, which I've exposed before. We also see William Parker Folk show up there. So, of course, that organization was founded by the murderer and fraud of the early 1700s, a guy by the name of Benjamin Franklin that many of you may have heard of, one of the so-called founders of the country, who in 1999 they found 15, let me just see, here we go, 15 bodies in his basement. I'm just going to show that right here on screen so that people can see that citation themselves. But, you know, these are the type of people that we're dealing with. Why was Ben Franklin's basement filled with skeletons? Of course, they come up with some sophistic nonsense excuse of why 1,200 pieces of bone turned up in his basement. You know, it's always the sophistry and spin. No, he was a murderer, folks. He murdered people. He did human experiments. He was testing early vaccines and inoculations. He was pals with Cotton Mather of Salem witch trials fame, and they PR'd the whole thing, and Ben Franklin and his brother James and Dr. What's-His-Face that also owned the newspaper that his brother did. They took opposing sides for the Royal Society, and they argued against each other, just like Marshall and Cope did. You know, they sit there arguing over their own theories and all of this stuff. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you got Thomas Henry Huxley, Darwin's PR manager, on the back, managing the whole thing, and you do this and you do this, and we're going to promote you a little more than you, and we're going to have this whole bone war thing. You know, it's the same MO that we see throughout the Royal Society literature, that we see with Ben Franklin, that we see with the Salem witch trials and stuff. The Royal Society people behind the scenes pulling the strings, lying to everybody, and getting everybody to think that, you know, if you have a green beard and scream really loud and make death threats on the Joe Rogan podcast, that you're legitimate and not just a meathead, you know, or meatheads. Excuse my opinions. But anyway, I just wanted to add that and give some clarity on some of the, you know, database background information, because, you know, all of this stuff is in there so that you can go through there and study all of this stuff for yourself. Find out for yourself if we're just making this up. Find out if these people are all involved in eugenics, or if I'm just, you know, making this up. You know, spend some time, spend a few days or weeks studying the database and reading the citations that are in here. See what you find. Think critically. Study the trivium. Learn to question. Don't, you know, again, we're not here to teach you what to think. We're here to show you how to think, how to research, how to check information, how to spot fallacies, so that when someone is, you know, wearing a demon shirt and name-calling and making threats against someone's life, that you can realize that that's a false argument and the guy is lying, you know, and say, hey, wait a second, you know, maybe I should look into this further, and not just throw your arms up in the air and say, you know, opinions are like you know what, and, you know, we can't know the truth. All that means, whenever you see a contradiction, is that you don't have enough information, because I've been saying for 9 years, a contradiction is always a lie or an error, and all it means is that you don't have enough facts. There are no contradictions in nature, and once you get that a contradiction is always a lie or an error, you'll begin to see where to look for more information. And the more you do look for information and fact check, the more your self-confidence will grow. And not only that, you'll be able to get on the same page with people. That's what it literally means. When you actually check research and citations, you're on the same page. Aha, I found that this statement is true, or I found it's false. You know, that's why Caleb and Stephen and I and Mark and others, we can, you know, Chris, we can sit here and talk and discuss these things. Because when we set out on research, we're looking at the citations and the facts. We're not looking at what we want to believe when we start out. I didn't start out thinking dinosaurs are false. Oh, my God. I started out, like everybody else, believing in dinosaurs, and then seeing all the connections with Darwin and the Huxley family and all the frauds and all the attacks on the Bible and all the attacks on Logos and living in truth and all of the manufactured history and archaeology and anthropology and UNESCO and Julian Huxley and Aldous Huxley and all the Huxleys. You guys got to be wasted by now with all the Huxley talk. But, you know, when you see all of these things, you begin to see the pattern. And when you start to see the pattern and the contradictions, that's where you can look. Is it really that Thomas Henry Huxley and Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley and these guys were just so smart? Or were they just the best at running the fraud? They were paid at running the fraud one generation after the other, like Aldous Huxley admits in his conversation with Timothy Leary. So anyway, there's my rant, and just wanted to throw that in. Thanks, everybody, for your donations and support tonight. You know, we really appreciate and need all the support we can get. Caleb, why don't you give out your information again?
It's mick.caleb@gmail.com.
And you can go to logosmedia.com, or you can still hit the super chat button in there. I know, you know, probably 10 or 15 of you donated tonight. There's probably another 100 or 260 of you in there who didn't. Really appreciate all the support. And Stephen, what's yours?
You can contact me at stevensorensen@protonmail.com. I'll respond to you there. I try to do a good job of checking my email, but
and your donations
they don't come through. And my donation link is paypal.me/presidenttrip. I've just commented it in the chat there, but it's just one word. All donations are welcome. I do all this research in my free time, so whatever help you can give helps, and I can give back more. So.
Likewise, everybody, thanks so much. And I guess that's a wrap for tonight.
Yeah, until the next show on the Dinosaur Hoax.
Good grief, man. So anyway, it was fun, everybody. Thanks for all your support, and have a good night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Night.